tonight we are talking about extreme picky eating, beyond the usual picky eater into highly selective eating. And what these kids often feel is disgust. And we're going to delve into that with one of the leading researchers in the United States, Dr. Nancy Zucker. And she is, as I said earlier, with the Duke Center for Eating Disorders. As a matter of fact, she's the director and the founder of that center. So I'm honored to have her here. But before I introduce you, I just want to give a little plug. So I have known about her work for many, many years, but as I just don't even know, the angels would have it. Several years ago, my co-author of Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater, right behind me here, Dr. Namali Fernando, was on NPR. And who was the other guest on NPR? It was Dr. Zucker. And so we connected after that, and the team at Duke, at the Center for Eating Disorders, got behind our preschool curriculum, the Dr. Young Preschool Food Adventure. And some of you may have seen that presentation 2 years ago at the American Speech Language Hearing Association, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics. And we were there to present the research that Dr. Zucker and her team did on our curriculum. So I'm really honored to have her here tonight. Would you do me a favor, Dr. Zucker, and just tell everybody a little bit about the center and a little bit more about your passion to help these children, and kind of how did this all come about that you created this center for eating disorders at Duke University?
Well, Melanie, thank you for such a kind introduction. I'm very glad that the lighting in my room is a bit dim, or otherwise everyone would see me blushing.
Oh, you're so nice.
I really appreciate the warm introduction. So, one of so the Duke Center for Eating Disorders is an outpatient research and treatment center associated with Duke University School of Medicine. And it was born out of a couple passions. One was a desire to really come up with alternatives to treat children and adults with eating disorders in their home, right? And to try to find ways to circumvent the need for more higher level, what we call higher levels of care, the need for hospitalization or any kind of day treatment program that really helping parents to have the tools to manage their child's eating is what the goal of it was. And and the design and my interest in our avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, which we'll talk about, and severe picky eating arose quite naturally from the parents that were kind of calling me in distress, right, and not feeling had that the most compelling thing I think was parents not feeling that they were heard and understood from people in their family or from certain healthcare professionals that were kind of disregarding what they were seeing in their home as being kind of trivial, whereas they were seeing it as being quite impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly stressful, not just for the child, not just for the parents, the entire family and the extended family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I'm really glad that you're here. And I'm also, I love the fact that you said to me, Mel, I want to talk about disgust. And I think that word that just, oh, that's disgusting. Like we throw that around all the time. But could you describe for our audience, really for these kids, and I know you work with adults too, but I'm primarily, I am a pediatric feeding therapist. So when I'm talking about this, I'm typically thinking of children. What is it like for kids to truly feel disgust around food? What is disgust, and why do some kids even feel that way?
Yeah, I think, well, thank you for asking that. So I'll kind of start. I won't kind of belabor it too much, but give you kind of everyone a short answer. One of the ways to think about any type of emotional experience is that it has a purpose, right? It's communicating something to us, and we have it for a reason. It helps to activate our bodies in a way that helps facilitate certain behaviors to get that need met. So for example, for anxiety, right, fear, that signals that there's danger, right? Or for anxiety, the potential for future danger. And so all the physiological changes, our beating heart, our sweaty palms, right, help us to get the heck out of there, right? And so that we can avoid danger. And so when we think about disgust, and we think about, okay, why does disgust exist? What is the purpose of disgust? Disgust is designed to help us avoid potential sources of contamination, right? To help us avoid pathogens, right? And so the reactions that we see when kids feel disgusted are those that are designed, feeling nauseous, right? Throwing up, right? You know, like closing your airway, scrunching your nose, are all designed to help a pathogen avoid crossing a body boundary, right? And so when we kind of cavalierly say, that's disgusting, right? We are trying to avoid something that we think of as, a potential pathogen, but we've kind of co-opted that word to convey like ethical morality violations, when in fact it's really designed to help us avoid things that are truly contaminating, and to help us from ingesting things that are contaminating.
And I would imagine that anxiety comes into play there, because if we've ever had an experience specifically around food that created that disgust, I think an honest example just for anybody would be if you ever had the stomach flu, and depending on what you threw up at dinner, you don't really want to go back to that food for a while. It feels disgusting because it's associated with those awful feelings, very uncomfortable feelings. But I think as if we continue to avoid those foods, what accompanies that then is the anxiety, the anticipatory anxiety, that what if I have to have that? What if they serve that? What if I throw up? And all of those what ifs that come along with anxiety and those deep-rooted feelings that I think are really, as you said, biologically based.
Right. That's it. Right. So it's that initial experience, right, is such a powerful learning. And then all the things that become associated with that experience, right, become avoided, right, potentially through the fear learning architecture, right? So avoiding social events, right, where there's the fear that you might gag and embarrass yourself or the host, and just gagging being unpleasant as an experience in any case, right? But we all have a story of a food that we had a bad experience with, and for some, right, that's all it took, right? If it has a very distinctive smell, right, a very set experience, right, then that food for some people will be forever stricken from their diets, right?
Absolutely. And I think with our kids who are diagnosed with ARFID, we don't always know what that experience might have been. It might have been a series of events. Sometimes we can't go back and figure out exactly what happened. And sometimes it's more obvious. Sometimes parents can report to me when they start to see the change. But as time goes on, the more the kids avoid those situations, the stronger the anxiety monster becomes. But also, tell me if I'm wrong here. What I want to learn is, does the disgust become stronger? That, in other words, the longer time that goes between having tried that food and the fact that you're replaying that disgusting event in your head, do you think that when it comes time to possibly interacting with that same food that caused the initial disgust, that the feeling of disgust has also grown as well?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question, right? And it's why the research in this area is so exciting. We know a lot about fear memories, right? And the fact that they can get potentiated over time, right? Reenacted, triggered, right? We don't know very much about disgust memories, right? But certainly, we can infer from the way that these kids behave, right? Where it's such a strong emotional reaction, right? That through processes of conditioning, right, that this feeling of disgust has become potentiated, certainly in their minds, right, because they haven't had direct experience with it, right? And I think the more important, well, an equally important thing is when you think about, things fading over time, just people getting used to them. And we think about the purpose of disgust, which is to help us avoid pathogens, right? That's not something that we would be designed to want to get used to, right? You don't want to get used to a malaria carrying mosquito. You don't want to, like, if you hang out with a malaria carrying mosquito over 20 minutes, you don't want to be like, oh, he's really cute. Like we should, share a glass of wine. You want to kind of remain, disgusted, or so it is the case that what we do know about disgust is it stays around, it has a longer kind of what we call extinction curve than anxiety, right?
Yeah.
It stays longer, right?
Right. So not only are we dealing with the feelings of anxiety and helping those eventually to sort of die a natural death over time, but we're also dealing with the physiological presence of disgust. And anxiety can create some of those same manifestations, like nausea and the feeling of I'm going to choke, and what if I gag, and now I'm getting nervous. And so I can see where it's hard to kind of tease it apart. But on the other hand, I also assume they almost always go hand in hand. But what does disgust look like besides the some of the characteristics you were mentioning that are biological in nature, the nose, the look that we all have. Every human being has the same look when they're disgusted with something, especially when it comes toward their face. Are there any other signs that we as parents or clinicians should watch for to realize that this child is really, really in discomfort?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. One is, so if you think about how disgust operates, right, it's to protect you. And so it is designed, so disgust sensitive child is going to notice signs that something might be contaminated, right? Any kind of irregularity, right, that could signal something different, right? Certainly a smell, right, that is offensive. So kids who are extremely disgust sensitive will inspect their food, right, just like they are working for the king and are the official taster and have to ensure that it's safe for the king to ingest, right? So they'll sniff it oftentimes, right? They'll visually inspect it to make sure that there's no irregularity. And oftentimes you'll see these kids, right, sorting their food, right? These are chips that are okay to eat, and these are ones, right? And those are all, disgust protective behaviors, right? They're trying to avoid a potential pathogen, right? Even though intellectually, right, they might know that the chips are the chips. And this is the second part of disgust that's so interesting. So anxiety, you'll feel butterflies in your tummy or feel some agitation. But but anyone who has had, if you think, the best example that I can always give is when meeting someone for the first time, right, and you get this visceral feeling that they're creepy, right? You let's say you've got their CV. This is a new colleague, right? They're good on paper, right? And you meet them and they're creepy. Doesn't matter how many facts you're given about this person. It's an unshakable feeling, right? Your gut feelings about this, right? And so these kids with arfid, right? That's what disgust feels like, right? This, they can intellectualize with you, and they can say to you, you know what, I know this is silly. Like, I see my parents eating these chips, but it just feels really wrong to eat them. And so I think.
Yeah, and what's so interesting for me about that, and what hurts my heart when I think about what these kids are going through, is that they know logically that this doesn't make sense, but it doesn't matter, because what they're feeling is stronger, and they think to themselves, what's wrong with me? That's what bothers me the most. But it's not that anything's wrong with them, it's that they are genuinely having a reaction. I think of it like an allergic reaction to these foods, and that they truly are in a stage of high discomfort. And that's exceptionally hard for the parents as well, because no parent wants to see their child uncomfortable.
Right, right.
Right,
And I,
exactly.
and that understanding that you just spoke of, we had one study that we did was where we had adults who were still struggling with extreme selective eating or potentially arfid, just right to, this is, it's retrospective, so you always have to take it with a grain of salt, but just kind of what their parents did that was helpful and what their parents did that was not helpful. And one of the things that came up is this, any kind of indication of a label, right? Though that my kid's a picky eater, or things like that, things that they experience as kind of shame inducing, right?
Okay.
That there's, like you just said, right, that there's something wrong with them, as opposed to just being, beautifully sensitive individuals, right, who have this strong, reactions to the world around them.
Right.
Was made it a lot easier for them to explore.
It's so interesting you should say that, because I was just recording a podcast and it was about picky eating. And they said, what's the first thing parents can do? And I said, the first thing we can do is ban the term picky eater. Because in our household, everybody's a learning eater. Everybody's a food explorer. I'm still a learning eater. I'm still learning to eat new foods. And there are definitely ones that are a little bit harder for me, and I have to work up my courage. But I think when we look at it differently, that's the first step for change, really. It's when we label it differently. Yeah, that's so interesting that that's what the adults said. So what strategies then really work with these kids, and what don't work with these, what we think of as disgust sensitive children?
Yeah, I think that, so one of the things that's important to think about with disgust is that every day, we do approach disgusting things, right?
Yeah.
So despite the fact that they are disgusting, we approach them, right? And we are talking to, many, many parents, right, who have changed, hundreds, if not thousands of diapers, and have cleaned up puke and done all kinds of disgusting things and would gladly do it again, right? Because it's in the service of taking care of their children and showing love, right? Nurses, doctors, many, right? All of, how our health professions deal with gangrene, all these things. And so if you ask them, if we were to hand a parent a diaper filled with feces, right, despite changing thousands of diapers, you would say, is the poop disgusting? Yes, it remains disgusting, right? But I'm going to approach it, right, because it's in the service of this other thing. And so when we are approaching foods that have the potential to elicit, disgust with kids, what we're doing is we're changing the context of it. We're not trying to prove to the kids that the food isn't disgusting. We're actually getting away from evaluation altogether, getting away from good, bad, I like it, I don't like it, right? It's all in the service of being, using our sensory superpowers to have an experience with this food and exploration, just like the beautiful work that you and Namali do, right? To create a pleasurable memory, right? To create an experience, and where the kid's in control, right? They're having, we are collecting, positive memories with food, just like, marbles in a jar.
Right.
Those are competing with, like you said, these fear memories, these disgust memories, and the buildup of those increases approach, right? And so when the child can have an experience with a food where they're not forced to label, right? And they can kind of turn that kind of disgust, but they can just kind of notice. And what is happening is that they have a memory that is competing with this disgust memory, and weakening those associations.
And weakening those associations. I'm nodding because I was literally talking to a family and another therapist in New York recently. And one of the things I really noticed was that the child that they were working with, who was older, just like the kids we're talking about here, he he was rating the food on a scale of 1 to 5 or something. And sometimes we do that with our garden variety picky eaters. But with these kids, I personally don't like to do that because almost everything is a -1. I'm like, you can't say
Right.
-1. You got to start with 0. Like, no, this is a -1. And so it doesn't do any good because all I'm doing is convincing them that this is disgusting. Instead, what I need to do is help them find language to describe the food, but not describe so much the feeling that is a result of interacting with the food. And that's why I love what you said about the sensory superpowers. And I know on your website, you have an excellent video about being a sensory superpower hero. And I actually put the link in the very beginning for everyone. And I'll put it again here in just a few minutes so that everyone can see that video. It is so good and such a good one to show not only to children, but also to any adult that is there to help that child so that we can pivot and change our thinking about how we talk about this. These kids are superhero, sensitive, awesome kids. And we can use that when we're helping them, label them a little bit differently.